Good day, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Military and Foreign Affairs Network. I am your host, the voice of reason. Today, we're continuing our ongoing coverage of the war between the Russian Federation and the Ukraine. Now, today, heavy fighting continues along all sectors of the front, to include the battles in the vicinity of the Kursk Oblast, as Ukrainian troops continue their incursion inside of the Russian Federation. We continue to see large-scale advances by Russian forces towards the transportation hub of Pokrovsk. The Russian Donbass offensive continues, a very, very methodical offensive operation, again designed to break the back of the Ukrainian military. And that's why we believe the Ukrainians avoided sending these additional forces that could have been used to shore up defensive operations within the vicinity of Pokrovsk, Torsk, New York, and some of these other contested areas in which the Russians continue to advance. Now, I have spoken often in terms of the casualty estimates. For quite some time, the mainstream media here in the West, whether it be CNN, AP, Reuters, the MSN in general, tends to report what the Ukrainian Ministry of Defense and the Ukrainian state in terms of casualty figures for their inflicting of casualties upon the Russians. And I've spoken that those casualties are way overestimated, tremendously overestimated. Even if you look at the casualty estimates that the Ukrainians report in the Kursk incursion, the casualty estimates that the Ukrainians report exceed the number of Russian troops that are deployed in this area of operations. So we know that it is simply impossible in terms of what is being reported by the Ukrainian military. Furthermore, the Russians have a much, much larger air force. Many, many times bigger. They are able to generate more sorties against Ukrainian ground targets. Thus, inherently, you will see higher combat losses on the side that simply doesn't have an air force, which is the Ukrainians. Now, what's interesting, it is now believed that the MSN, the mainstream media here in the West, have finally realized that the casualty estimates being reported by the Ukrainians are simply impossible. Not improbable, not maybe a little off, but are impossible. Impossible. So, as we speak, for instance, Reuters will no longer report casualty estimates given out by the Ukrainians. It's done. They won't do it anymore. And the reason they won't do that is because they know they are reporting a farce. They're reporting incorrect information. They're being used as a propaganda tool of the Ukrainian state. Now, I mean, obviously, have the Ukrainians caused the Russian casualties? Yes, absolutely. But not the amount of casualties that the Ukrainians are currently reporting day in and day out. It's utterly impossible and ridiculous. Now, as we look, for instance, what is happening in the Kursk incursion, you have about 7 Ukrainian combat brigades of about 10 to 15,000 troops continuing this operation. The Russians have set up a blocking force along key routes of advance to include the 56th Air Assault Regiment, the 810th Naval Infantry Brigade, the 11th Separate Assault Brigade, and elements of the 144th Motorized Rifle Division. Now, we have received reports that it is believed that the Russians are quietly positioning a fairly sizable force designed for an offensive operation to push the Ukrainians out of this area of Kursk. But right now, these blocking formations continue to hold, and more importantly, the Russian Air Force, which is using Lancet drones, they are using helicopter gunships, K-52s, Mi-28s, Mi-35s. They're using fixed-wing aircraft such as Su-25s against Ukrainian formations in this Kursk pocket. Now, you have to understand the Ukrainians aren't able to respond in kind. Look, there are no Ukrainian F-16s operating even close to the area of the Kursk incursion. There are no F-16s operating in the Sumy region. In all likelihood, F-16s have not crossed the area of the Dnieper River here. The F-16s, if in fact they are even being used, are being operated either in the far western part of Ukraine, and most likely are taking off from NATO countries such as Poland and Romania. We have reason to believe that the Ukrainian F-16s are not even deployed in the Ukraine, but are being operated out of NATO bases. They'll fly out of these NATO bases. They will briefly touch down on a Ukrainian airstrip, possibly top off with some fuel, and then take off again. But we understand that a lot of these F-16s that the Ukrainians have, there's not a great many of them. There's less than a dozen operational right now. They're being used in NATO countries. But we have not really seen these F-16s be forward deployed against Russian forces. Just hasn't happened yet. Now again, Reuters and we believe other news outlets are going to quit reporting the numbers that the Ukrainians are reporting in terms of casualties that they're inflicting upon the Russians. It's believed by this channel and many others that in fact the Ukrainians are suffering a great many more casualties in this ongoing war than the Russians are. And again, the Russians are using this strategy of fix, hold, and then bomb with its air force, artillery, and multiple launch rocket systems. Now, obviously, when the Russians do assault positions, such as the fighting that is taking place to the east of Pokrovsk, they're going to take casualties, and they are taking casualties. But we don't believe at this point, especially in the area of operations in the Kursk incursion, that the Russians are taking casualties even close to what the Ukrainians are. Remember, the Ukrainians are essentially on the offensive inside of the Russian Federation. Now, they have not gone very far, but this has given the Russians now the ability to hold these areas and then pound the Ukrainian military with air assets. And that's what they're doing. We have seen reports that weapon systems such as the Russian Mi-28 Havoc is just doing just what it's named for, causing havoc among Ukrainian forces, especially at night. The Ukrainians quit moving at night in the area of the Kursk incursion because they fear those Russian helicopter gunships. So we're continuing to watch this area of the operation. We're continuing to watch very closely what is happening just to the east of Pokrovsk. If we go to the last 10 days, we'll go back to, let's go back to August 10th. So you, the viewer, can actually see what has happened over the course of the last essentially couple weeks. So here we go. So you're looking at this area in terms of the very methodical Russian advance, and we'll start moving forward. They're just unable to stop them. They, meaning the Ukrainians, the Russians, stop the Russians. And eventually the Russians will start fighting inside of Pokrovsk. Maybe the Ukrainians will withdraw from Pokrovsk. Difficult to say. They do look like they're trying to fortify it and make a stand, and in which case the Russians in all probability will have to rubbleize the town or city. The Ukrainians are evacuating the civilians of this area in anticipation of that final battle. Now the Russians, if they have to, I'm sure they're just going to use their air force. They're going to use their artillery to simply destroy Ukrainian forces in Pokrovsk. And then, yes, there will probably be pitched battles that'll take place in the city with light infantry. And then after that, the Russians will take control of the city itself. So that's where we stand for today. We will continue to watch, monitor, and report. Thank you for joining us. More to come very soon. As always, have a good day.